Shalom, Yahba Shim Yahushai Barakathum, to all my brothers, Yahweh Shemal, Ataba Shim Yahushai, to all my sisters. We're the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. We've been teaching so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Indians that they're the Lord's chosen people. According to the Bible, according to these scriptures, we are the real Jews that the Bible speaks of. We've been teaching this truth since 1969 in the Commander General Yohana. Today's Boston's history class every Monday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. If you're tuned in now, if you have any questions, ask your questions. Today we're going to be going over Halloween, Mischief Night, as well as Christianity, and how it all ties in together. But if you have any questions, by all means, ask your questions. Let me set up some sources real quick. One particular source that I want to pick up on, just to give a brief breakdown of the origin of how it's a pagan holiday that's been Christianized sometime around the 9th century. Comes from an old Celtic ancient culture, and we'll really get to the bottom of this. Let's thank the Lord. Number one, let's thank the Lord for, snuffing out the spirit of Halloween. If it wasn't for this COVID, it would be more amped than what it is right now. COVID has slowed a lot of things down. It's snuffed out the spirit of Halloween. It's also, Lord willing, it snuffs out the spirit of Christmas. I'm praying that Christmas is a drag this year. I'm praying that, everybody has a miserable time during Christmas. Also praying that the Lord continues to pour out his plagues on Babylon. And as we wait for the coming of our Lord, our King, Yahushua Mashiach. But let's go back. All right. So let's talk about the dark history of Halloween. I don't know if there's any questions online. This is pretty interesting. If you don't really know where this comes from, a lot of this is common knowledge. You hop on your Google machine and you'll be able to understand where these pagan roots come from. I noticed this weekend it's pretty live this weekend. People are trying to resurrect Babylon by maintaining the spirit of Halloween. I've seen a couple of foolish children out there with their Winnie the Pooh outfits and their Halloween costumes. And despite being in the middle of a pandemic, we still want to play games with the Most High. We still want to act like children and put on a stupid Halloween costume. And we can't understand the nature of how these pagan holidays and these pagan belief mythologies have destroyed our people. And despite plague on Babylon, we still will try to put on the spirit of these wicked holidays. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. You know what I mean? In the midst of a pandemic, you still want to keep up the spirit of Halloween. You still want to keep up the spirit of Thanksgiving, the spirit of Christmas, right? And I pray that the Lord, snuffs the spirit out of you. The feast days of America, the feast days of our oppressor, is detestable to the Lord, right? The Lord hates our feast days. Where can we find this? For you Bible scholars out there in the UPK, you know the answer. But for those that are not familiar with the Bible, where can you find the scripture that says that the Lord despises our feast days? And keep in mind, the key word is our feast days. In retrospect to the Lord's feast days, what he established, we've taken on the feast days of our slave master. We've taken on the feast day oppressor. And as you know, right? And so something like Halloween, not only, not only our oppressor or America keeps up this paganistic holiday, but other cultures throughout time have always worshipped the dead, right? You think of Cinco de Mayo with the Mexicans, right? The Chinese have a Day of the Dead. Every culture has a Day of the Dead. Now, what do Israelites believe? We believe in reincarnation. We don't believe in the spookiness of ghosts and goblins and the dead haunting us. That is a pagan. That is a pagan mentality. That is a heathen mentality, right? We believe that when someone dies, their spirit goes to the Most High, and they are planted again, right? We believe that all of us have been here since the Garden of Eden, and so the idea that your dead grandma and spirits and the idea of the realm between the spirit, the realm between the physical world and the spiritual world and the realm of the dead has collided on a specific day. We're going to get to the bottom of how this pagan holiday came about and why it's a sin to celebrate Halloween, right? But with that, let's get it. So we're gonna pull up. Bear with me. All right. So the history of Halloween. I'm not sure if y'all can see it, but let's pull this up right here. All right. I'm gonna highlight it, and we're gonna go through this article right here. It's an ancient. The website is www. This is a good one because it gives a good timeline of the whole. But I'm gonna put this in the chat. But that's the website right here that I'm on. All right, it says Halloween. The history of Halloween. Halloween is among the oldest traditions in the world, as it touches on essential elements of the human condition, right? Let's keep reading. The relationship between the living and the dead. Now, this is the part I wanted to pull up. Antiquity to present day believes from the time of antiquity to present day believes in a relationship between the living and the dead. A lot of times, people that are all spooked out and think that they have ghosts in their house or think that their dead uncle or their dead grandma is roaming around in the house. A lot of times, what they don't realize is that they're being tormented by a demon, right? The only thing that roams dimension and connects with our world are demons, right? Spirits from on high. How can I say this? When someone is demon possessed, the demon, the spirit that person has on them, the demonic spirit or the spirit of friendly ghost roaming around your house or a dead relative in the midst of the living roaming around, haunting people, that comes from pagan roots. And so we have to understand that the relationship between the living and the dead does not exist, right? Meaning, once you're dead, your spirit leaves your body, and your spirit reports back to the Most High to be judged in front of at the Most High's throne. That's what happens to your spirit. Your flesh your flesh starts the decaying process, and it's sowed back onto the earth, right? So we have to really key in the fact that anything that has a pulse, right? If it doesn't have a pulse and it's in the ground or it's in the tomb somewhere, then it's just a shell. There's no spirit in it. There's no, let me get this right. There's no soul in that shell or in that body, right? But every culture believes in this relationship between the living and the dead. The Israelites were the only ones that believed in reincarnation, right? We were the only ones that believed that, that you would come back to once you were judged. Leave the bedroom the way it was when that person has died, or they'll set up an extra. They'll set them an extra plate on the dinner table for their dead grandma. And so a lot of times people have a hard time letting go of those that have died, right? When in the Bible mentions 7 days. After 7 days, man, clean yourself up. You know what I mean? You mourn in ashes and in sackcloth and ashes, but after them 7 days, clean yourself up. You know what I mean? Let me pull up a quick scripture real quick. But Salaki, it seems like I'm having buffering issues. Let me know how consistent those buffering issues are. You know what I mean? Let me know how consistent that is. But we should be mourning for 7 days, and then we should move on, right? 7 days is a good time period to mourn and to weep for those that have moved on. Is the key word. So it says this, right? I'm going to read two scriptures. In Ecclesiasticus, chapter 22, verse 12, it says, 7 days do men mourn for him that is dead. There's a lot of people that mourn for years and years on end, and they continue to keep, they'll never throw away their stuff that was in the household. Like I was mentioning, they'll set up an extra plate on the dinner table. They'll set up a shrine, candles, and they'll literally start talking on some, and it can become a mental illness. They'll literally walk around the house and start talking like their dead grandmother is right there. And a lot of time it's a demon that's tormenting brothers and sisters that have not been able to let go those that have those loved ones that have lost their life. Right? Let me. I don't like to say lost their life, but who the Lord took. Right? But Ecclesiasticus chapter 22, verse 12, read it again. 7 days do men mourn for him that is dead. In Ecclesiasticus chapter 41, verse 11, it says, the mourning of men is about their bodies. So we're mourning, right? And as we're mourning for that dead body, but we should not be doing it for more than 7 days. Because if you are an Israelite, you understand that they will come back, right? They might not come back in your lifetime. They will come back, right? What else does the Bible say? It says, it says, this, Ecclesiasticus chapter 7, verse 1. It says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. We are not to be celebrating birthdays, right? The only thing, listen, when a child is born, yeah, doing baby showers is not a sin. But to repeatedly celebrate, there's another one. Erskine, the water for that. Yeah, that's another one. They keep the urn in the ashes of their dead relative. And number one, you should not be cremating a body. You should not be cremating a body. You should sow that body back to the earth. That's what you should do. But it says this. Let me read it again. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 1, it says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. We are not to be celebrating birthdays, right? And we understand that death is only horrible because of the condition that we're in, where we die by the hands of police, where we die by AIDS, and we die by the curses of the Lord, right? But death should be something that, when you, like, for instance, if you have a relative or a brother or sister that's 90 years old and is in pain and agony, and old age has stricken their bodies, the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. Meaning that body is or that person that's old and ill, that person needs a new body, right? That person needs will watch little kids when they have when a little child that's a year old, 2 years old, the way they exercise their body and the way they run up and down, and they try to figure out what the fingers can do and the legs can do. It's an amazing thing to see. And so keep in mind, that little child that you're looking at was that old lady that was 90, 95, 100 years old that needed a new body, right? You are not to sit there and try and mourn for more than 7 days. After 7 days, you have to let that person go and understand that that person is coming back. If you're an Israelite, right? You'll understand that. So basically, you're mourning for the body, but you are not to mourn for more than 7 days, right? And that's biblical. That's what I just read earlier. But let's keep reading. Now let's get to the meat of this, right? I just wanted to bring that up, where it says, and how the living should best honor those who have passed or respond to the dead, who seem unwillingly or unable to move on. Let me tell you something. The dead has moved on. It's you that hasn't moved on, and every culture has tried to figure out a way to honor the dead, right? And a lot of times people honor the dead, but here's another way they honor the dead. We do it all the time. America does it all the time. They do it with what? Statues, right? They use statues to honor the dead. MLK has a huge statue, I believe, in Atlanta, where black people will pray to that statue. Black people will pray to MLK like he's an idol, right? Another way to, how do we honor the dead with what? Martin Luther King's birthday, right? There's another one, right? We honor the dead through all these different holidays. The only dead that we don't honor is on Thanksgiving, we celebrate the death of our brothers and sisters, right? We don't honor the dead then, do we? Right? But let's keep reading. So it says, countries around the world today celebrate Halloween in one form or another, from Mexico's Day of the Dead to China's Tomb Sweeping Day. The modern-day observance of Halloween in countries such as the United States and Canada, where this tradition is most popular, share in this ancient tradition, even though some aspects of the holiday are relatively recent developments. And here's the kicker, and can trace back to the Celtic festival of Samhain. Halloween is the Celtic the best, the way to put it, it's not Celtics, it's Celtics is really how you pronounce it. It's a Celtic holiday, right, called Samhain. It's spelled Samhain, right? It's called Samhain. That's how you say it. That's where Halloween comes from. It's traced back to a Celtic festival called Samhain. And it's also infused with the Roman festival, Lemuria, right? It's also rooted back to a Roman festival named Lemuria. And also there's another Roman festival, Feralia. And all of this ties in together. But there's a key player in all this to bring about Halloween that you see today. And that's the Christian church. That's the Christian church, which Christianizes every pagan holiday to get those that are not in the church, to get them in there, to draft them in by into the Christianity that you see today. So it didn't matter what God you served, you can be a Christian. And this is one thing you need to understand, is that your religion is heavily rooted in paganism. It's heavily rooted in Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, Roman mythology. It's heavily rooted in all the pagan religions that you can think of today, right? The Catholic Church is universal in this sense, that it allows everyone to come in. Everybody gets to sleep with this whore, right? This whore called the Christian church caters to every god. Christians believe in many gods. They are polytheists, is what they are. And they've made Christ a demigod, right? Half man, half God. And so it doesn't matter what religion you want to express. Doesn't matter what God you worship. Just know that universally you could be a Christian and still bring your God with you, right? You can worship white Jesus and whatever God you want to worship in the Christian church, because what the Christian church has been doing for thousands of years is they've Christianized every pagan god, every pagan religion. All right? But let's go. Let's get it. Let's read. Let's find out what this sound is about in about a hot sec. But let's keep reading. Christian groups throughout the years have routinely attempted to demonize and denigrate the observance, in part by repeating the erroneous claim that Samhain was the Celtic god of the dead and Halloween his feast. The error comes from the 18th century CE British engineer Charles Valency, who wrote on the Samhain festival with a poor understanding of the culture and language, and has been repeated uncritically since. It was actually the church itself, however, which preserved. I'm going to read this part one more time. I'm going to highlight it. This is what it says here. For all you Christians out there, pay attention. right? It was actually the church itself, however, which preserved the Samhain tradition in the West by Christianizing it in the 9th century CE, setting the course for a pagan Northern European religious traditions transformation into a worldwide secular holiday, which has become the most popular and commercially lucrative of the year, second only to Christmas. Now, peep what I just read here. The Christians were the ones that reserved this Celtic festival called Samhain. And it also mentioned, and this happened in the 9th century CE, but it also mentioned that it's one of the most lucrative holidays, meaning it's a holiday that generates so much money, so much dinero, right? That it's second to Christmas. Christmas is the holiday that generates the most money, right? Throughout the year, throughout all the holidays. But Halloween comes second. And now what is the Lord trying to do? Do you believe, I'm speaking to you Christians out there, do you believe that the Lord is okay with you decking that building, the Christian church, with Halloween decorations? Do you believe that the Lord is accepting of that? Do you believe that the Lord has approved of you worshiping the dead? Do you believe, Christians, that the Lord has approved of you wearing a mask and a Halloween costume and doing all manner of mischief on the night of Halloween, right? When the night of Halloween is also another very important night for Wicca and those that practice Wicca, right? But we'll get into that in a sec. But let's go to Amos chapter 5, verse 21, all right? It says this. We're in Amos chapter 5, verse 21. Here's what the Lord says for out there that are anticipating this Halloween to go out and do mischief and do all manner of evil. Here's what the Lord says about Halloween. Amos 5, "Rise your feast days, and I will not smell in your solemn assemblies." The Lord hates Halloween the same way he hates Christmas. These holidays have been so commercialized, and these holidays fuel these corporations. It fuels America. And as you know, America is a corporation. America can be bought, right? And so, from the Halloween costumes to the Halloween candy to the Halloween decorations, right? Everything is about pumpkins. You know how many pumpkins they got out there, man? I mean, everywhere you look, it's pumpkin this, pumpkin pies, and pumpkin lattes, and everything is just pumpkins. And what does the pumpkin represent? We'll find out, right? We'll find out where all this comes from. Coincidence, right? We'll find out the root to all this, right? But let's keep reading. It says this. Samhain. Here's what Samhain is, right? I'm going to highlight it so you can see what I'm talking about. Samhain, Halloween traditions in the West date back thousands of years, right? I'm going to highlight it so you can see what I'm talking about. Samhain, Halloween traditions in the West date back thousands of years to the festival of announced Samhain, or Samhain, the Celtic New Year's festival, right? So now this was a New Year's festival for the Celtics, right? Just like January 1st is considered America's New Year's, and then just like the Chinese have their New Year's, well, on November 1st, this was their New Year's, right? Let's keep reading. It says, the name means summer's end, and the festival marked the close of harvest season and the coming of winter. What you'll start to understand is that you'll start to see a parallel with a lot of these holidays, and how if you went to the root and you traced back to a lot of these holidays had a lot to do with harvest season, had a lot to do with the dead, the relationship between the living and the dead. It had a lot to do with the winter, and so they started to worship the sun, and they started to worship and fear the gods that controlled winter and the weather. You know what I mean? There was one specific God in the Bible, one specific God that they worshipped in the Bible. I'm trying to forget, that dealt with harvest. And I think it was a Moabite God that the children of Israel sinned in the sight of the Lord and started. I forget the name. I almost want to pull it up. Let me see. See if I can figure out his name. See if it pops up. If it don't, then we'll skip it. But a lot of this had a lot to do with them worshiping the sun god for survival. Because in the wintertime was the time that you were supposed to round up your crops and prepare for the winter, right? Specific God, the Lord of Harvest. I'm trying to figure out what the name of that God is, but since we don't have that, let's keep reading. It'll pop. It might pop up later. Shalom, brother. Sway from the tribe of Simeon. Shalom, shalom. We talking about Halloween, Sway. We're going back to the roots of Halloween, the pagan root of Halloween. If you have any questions, ask any questions online. But let me go back to my source real quick. All right, so let's figure out what Samhain is, where Halloween comes from. I'm going to highlight it real quick, starting from here. The name means summer's end. A lot of people feared this time of year when the summer would end, because during the fall represented the dying of plants, the dying of crops, right? Fall represented the summer ending, going into the winter. And what you have to understand about October 31st and November 1st is that they would consider that a small portal or window where the dead can come into the can roam into the physical and haunt people. So there was a lot of, what we call superstition, which is something that Christians are well known for. They're well known for being superstitious, right? And a lot of people in ancient times were superstitious when it came to death, when it came to the dead, when it came to witches and cats. And so you'll start to see a lot of these symbolisms where, when you think of a black cat, you think of bad luck. You think of Halloween. You think of a witch. You think of a witch on a broom. There's a lot of symbolisms that date back, and it's going to explain in this article, in the source that I pulled up, where all that comes from. But let's get it. All right, it says, the Celts believed that the veil between the world living and the dead were thinnest at this time, and so the dead could return and walk where they had before. Further, those who had died in the past year and who, for one reason or another, had not yet moved on, would do so at this time and could interact with the living. So they believed on October 31st, the day before the Celtics' New Year. Yes, Salakia, you got it. It is the Chinese god. It's a Moabite god, like I mentioned. I forget his name. If anyone remembers the Moabite god's name, it's on the tip of my tongue. I just don't remember. But just not to retract, October 31st and November 1st, there's a veil that they believed opened up, where the dead can come and roam and walk among the living. And it was during this period between October 31st and their new year, November 1st, where they believed that the dead had not moved on can come and walk in the midst of them. So now, keep these dates in mind. Now, when it comes to Wicca, they have a whole nother thing that goes on that day, right? So what we're explaining is the relationship between the living and the dead. That's what we're trying to explain, and how the two worlds, there's a portal between the two worlds where the dead can jump to the portal of the living, or the realms, these two realms, on this day between October 31st and the 1st, November 1st, they conclude. You know what I mean? Now, I want to explain Wicca, but just to be on topic right now, Halloween, I just want to get to the root of Halloween while we have time. But it says this, right? It says, further, those who died in the past year. Okay, so now we're over here. Let me highlight it real quick. It says, very little is known of the rituals of an ancient Samhain because the church Christianized it. This is what I was trying to bring up. Here's one thing you need to understand about Christianity, is that every holiday that we see today has somehow, some way been Christianized. The thing about the Christian church, and why the Catholic Church and the Christian church is universal, why God loves everybody, and the church is for everybody. This dates back into the 9th century. It even dates back into the time of the inception of the Roman Catholic Church, even back to Constantine, who was the black emperor at the time. In order for them, that the Christian church's whole MO is to get members, to get more souls into this corrupt government body. And in the time of Rome was like the time of America today, where everybody worshiped all kinds of gods. And so what did the Catholic Church have to do in order for them to get converts? Basically what they had to do was they would allow you and they would Christianize it so that they can get more converts. So in actuality, Christian and serve white Jesus and make Christ an idol, and you could still worship. That's the agreement that has been made for the last 1,000 years since the inception of the Roman Catholic Church, which is why it's universal. You're able to bring your God into this sect, into this cult, and they'll Christianize it in a way where you can still worship your God. You can still worship the God of Lemuria. You can still worship the gods that the Romans have worshipped. And you can worship Jesus as well. You can worship Mary as well. That's the Christian church. The Christian church and its members and its cult members are polytheists. They worship many gods. The Israelites were monotheists, meaning we only worship one God, right? This is why the Bible says that a bishop should be blameless and the husband of one wife. Because if in order for you to claim this Israelite heritage and to know that you are in the faith is by you only worshiping one God, which is the Most High. Right? But Christians, they worship many gods. And these gods date back to the Roman gods like Jupiter, Saturnalia is another one that relates with Christmas, right? Let's keep reading. Very little is known of the Salaki. Let me go here real quick. Let's get it. It says this. Very little is known of the rituals of ancient Samhain because the church Christianized it. As with many pagan festivals, like I just mentioned, the church is the one that Christianized all these pagan festivals, including your favorite one, Christmas, and what information is available comes from the Irish monks who recorded the pre-Christian history of their people, as well as other Christian scribes denigrating pagan rites. It seems, however, that the observance included stocking up supplies for the winter, slaughtering cattle, and disposing of bones in bonfires, which in time came to be known as bonfires. So originally bonfires, this is actually an interesting fact, right? No, the Inquisition, Salaki, the Inquisition, that's not where it comes at. It depends on which Inquisition. There's been many. But if you're talking about the Spanish Inquisition, no. You'd have to be more specific when you say Inquisition. There's been many Inquisitions that have been done by the Catholic Church. It dates so far back. But it says here, right? Let's keep reading. It says, and disposing of bones in bonfires, which in time came to be known as bonfires. So this is actually an interesting fact that I didn't know. Bonfires actually came from this holiday, where is rooted to this holiday where it says that they would stock up on supplies for the winter. They would slaughter the cattle, right, and dispose of the bones, which what they call bonfire. This is where the term bonfire comes from. I actually never knew that. That's an interesting fact right there. But let's keep reading. There were gatherings of communities for feasting and drinking while this was going on. But here's the key. But there was also the awareness of the thin time of the year and the possibility of other worldly visitors showing up at the party. So on this night, what they would do on October 31st was they do what people do today. They feast and they drink, and they understand that there's a thin line on this night where other outer worldly beings can pop up at the party, whether it's ghosts, fairies, goblins, whatever. They could pop up at the party. This is what they believed, that this was a night where evil spirits can show up while they were drinking, while they were feasting. Right? Let's keep reading. It says this. Departed loved ones were expected and welcomed, and the practice of setting out favorite foods for the dead may have originated as early as 2,000 years ago. Though this is unclear, but many other kinds of spirits, some which never had human form, could also appear. So this is what they also believed in. The other kind of spirits that they believed in is it's going to explain elves, fairies, the wee folk, sprites, and dark energies were just a likely to pay a visit, as those one longed to see again one last time. Right? Let's keep reading for sake of time. It says this. Further, there was a very good chance that the spirit of a person one may have wronged would also make an appearance in order to deceive. Now, in this part, where the whole idea of wearing costumes and a mask comes from. And let's read. I want you to pay attention to this part right here. Right? Where this idea of guising yourself or disguising yourself in a costume and mask comes from. It reads right here. It says, further, Let me just highlight. All right. It says further, there was a good chance that the spirit of one have wronged would have also make an appearance, right? So now, let's say, put it this way. Let's say if you wronged someone, right? Yeah, no, me too. Salakia, but you know, living, you know, growing up in the hood, our bonfire was a trash can. In the middle of somewhere in the hood near you. It was always a trash can, but we used to have bonfires too. And that's really where it comes from. The term bond means, it really comes from the term bone fire, right? Where they, like it said, they would, you know, they would slaughter their animals or their cows or whatever, prior, and stock up on supplies and take those bones and throw it into the fire, which is where the term bone fire came from. I never knew that, and it's actually first revelation of that. But the idea of costumes, or what they call guising, let's say you did someone wrong, right? And you had ill will towards somebody, and you did them wrong, and then that person passes away. A lot of times in the ancient times, they believed that you did someone wrong, or if you had ill will towards somebody, that person would come back. That person would come back and haunt you, right? And in order for you to avoid that spirit from coming back to haunt you or torment you, you would wear a disguise so the spirit would not recognize you. Now, if it was a family member, it would be different. But if it was someone that you wronged, this is why they wore the disguise on that night, because a portal opens up on October 31st where there's, like they said, there's a veil, a thin veil, right? A thin line where the spirits, outer worldly spirits, can dwell in the midst of the physical world, in the midst of the physical world. That's where why people wear costumes today. They wear the costumes because it's supposed to represent you being in disguise from a spirit that, or a person that you had beef with, that's come back in the spirit, in the dead, come back from the dead in the spirit to go and haunt you and come at you, right? When the Bible says you don't have any memory of the things of the past. You don't know who you were in the past. For all you nuts out there that think you were King David in the past, or this, that, and the third. You don't know who you were in the past, right? But let's read that. This is interesting. It says this. Further, there was a good chance that the spirit of a person one may have wronged would also make an appearance. In order to deceive the spirits, let me just put this up, pull this up so you know where it's coming from. In order to deceive the spirits, people darken their faces with ashes from the bonfires, a practice later known as guising. So originally, this is why the bonfires played an important role, is because they would disguise their face with the ashes from the bonfire. So on this night, while they were feasting and drinking and reveling on this night, they had high expectations of outer worldly spirits crossing over from the dead to the living, from the portal or the realm of the dead to the realm of the living, and so they're trying to hide from from whatever person they wronged or they mistreated, and so they would put the ashes on their face to disguise themselves. This is guising, right? This is where this whole thing comes from. And this developed. And it's going to tell you where now this developed into, right? Salakia, let me pull this. And this developed into wearing a mask. A living person would recognize the spirit of a loved one and could then reveal themselves, but otherwise remain safe from the unwanted attention of dark forces. this is where this all comes from. This is why this article is very interesting, because it really goes to show you that everything we do has always been traced down to pagan roots. So now you would eventually became wearing a mask. And the only time you would take off the mask is if it was the spirit of a loved one. If it was the spirit of the loved one, you would want them to recognize you. But if it's someone that you wronged or you did some sort of misdeed to, you kept the mask on so that spirit would not be able to recognize. Meaning, you're trying to remain safe from unwanted attention from what they call these darker forces. That's really what that was about. But let's keep reading. Now, All Hallows Eve, right? Halloween, the term itself, where does that come from? All Hallows Eve. Let's read. It says this. It says, All Hallows Eve. Let's read this part right here. All right. Actually, I want to jump down. Let's jump down to this part right here. It says, the Christianization of pagan symbols, temples, festivals, legends, and religious iconography is well established and applies to the Samhain festival as many others. Pope Boniface IV had set 13th of May as All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Day, a feast day to celebrate those saints who did not have their own in the 7th century CE, when he consecrated the great pagan temple of the Pantheon in Rome to Saint Mary and Christian martyrs. Pope Gregory III moved the date feast to November 1st. Now, there's a reason why they moved this date. The original of All Saints' Day was May 13th. That just happens to fall on the same Roman festival date of Lemuria, right? Lemuria, right? So Lemuria was a Roman festival, right? That also placated the dead. But let's read further on. Now, key this. All Saints' Day, which was a day that represented the martyrs and the saints, and how it went from May 13th, which was originally around the time of Lemuria, the Roman festival of Lemuria, to now going to November 1st, the day after Halloween, or Hallows Eve, right? But let's go. It says this. Prior to Salakia, it says this. Bear with me. Let's pull this up real quick. All right, let's go. All right, so it says this, right? It says, prior to Christianization, 13th of May had been the last day of the Roman festival of Lemuria, which ran from May 9th, 11, 13, dedicated to placating the angry or restless dead. The festival developed from a pair of observances held early in the year. Parentalia, which honored the spirits of one's ancestors. That ran from February 13th to February 21st. February 13th to February 21st. This falls around the time of Valentine's Day, right? Just pay attention to how all these holidays fall in line with the holidays that we have today. A lot of them are Roman holidays that have been Christianized, which is why the Catholic Church is the mother whore, right? Rome is the mother whore. The Roman Catholic Church is the mother whore that the Bible talks about in Revelation, right? If you're not in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, you are a Christian. You have, in some way, some form, have taken on the Christianization of all these holidays. No matter what it is, the Roman Catholic Church has an influence in every holiday. Right? But let's keep reading. It says this. On Feralia, the living were obligated to revisit the graves of the dead and leave them gifts in the form of grains, salt, breaded soaked in wine, and wreaths accompanied by violet petals. Now, earlier I was mentioning why we go to grave sites and to burial sites of loved ones, flowers, or gifts on their graves. Why do we do that? When we know that it's just a shell down there, right? That loved one is no longer in that body. Their soul left the body. But still, we still mourn the body, right? Years on, we go and we visit the grave site. Where does this come from? This comes from a festival called Feralia. And I'm going to read it one more time. It says Feralia, right? I'm going to highlight it so you know where I'm at. On Feralia, oh my God. Excuse me, I got it. I'm about to start a GoFundMe because I need a new computer. Side note. But anyways, it says on Feralia, the living were obligated to remember and visit the graves of the dead and leave them gifts in the form of grains, salt, bread, soaked in wine, and wreaths accompanied by violet petals. This is where we got the tradition of visiting grave sites, right? Visiting grave sites and leaving flowers for the dead on those grave sites. That's where this comes from. It comes from a Roman festival called Feralia, right? Here's what the Bible says.
Something's not right. Wait a few minutes and try setting up again. You can also try unplugging your device and plugging it back in.
Yeah, I hear you. That's Google for you. So this is where that idea comes from, right? Salakia, bear with me. But let's keep going for sake of time. All right? It's very interesting right here. A lot of things people are not familiar with, they do it in vain. But it says this, I'm going to highlight it. Let's keep reading. As it was with Paternalia, Feralia, Lemuria, and many others, so it was with Samhain. Right? Salaki, bear with me. I'm just typing something in. So it was with Samhain, right? Previously, the Samhain festival, which was associated with all those who had gone on before, with the earth, the change of the year, right? So that plays the very important part of Halloween, the change of the year. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the hour goes back this Saturday. I believe it goes back an hour this Saturday, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what happens this coming Saturday, that the hour goes back. But let's keep reading. With the earth, the change of the year, and this transformation was marked by celebration and communal activities. Once the festival was Christianized, All Hallows Eve became a night of vigil, prayer, and fasting in preparation for the next day, when the saints were honored at a far tamer celebration. Salakia. Okay. The practice is thought to have begun, Salakia. The old ways had not died out, however, and bonfires were still lighted, only in honor of Christian heroes, and the turning of seasons was still observed. So the Christians came in and they Christianized this holiday, but they didn't really change anything. Instead of, calling it All Hallows Eve, they created the All Saints Day for the following day. They still continue to do the bonfires. They still continue to keep the old ways of doing it, but they never fully, changed it. They just put a face mask on it, right? They just masked it so it could become more Christianized, right? Let's keep reading. All right. So now, and only now the glory of Christ. Many of the rituals which accompany, let's read this part right here. Many of the rituals which accompany this new incarnation of the festival are unknown by the 16th century CE. The practice of souling had become integral. The poor of the town of the city would go about. Now let's get to the trick-or-treating, right? Where does trick-or-treating come from? Well, let's find out, right? Here's what it says. It says, many of the rituals which accompany this new incarnation of the festival are unknown, but by the 16th century CE, the practice of souling is what you would call kids coming to your door saying trick or treat today. And let's find out. It says, the poor of the town of the city would go about knocking on doors asking for a soul cake, also known as a soul mass cake, in return for prayers. This practice is thought to have begun in response to the belief in purgatory, where it was thought that a soul lingered in torment unless elevated by prayer and most often money paid to the church. So now, trick-or-treating in its original form was called souling. And so the poor in the town would come to your door and they would knock on your door and they would ask for these soul cakes. And it said, in return, the people that would knock on your door would pray for the souls, right? That they be released from torment, right? So you would give, and they would pray for your dead ones, that they would be released from torment in a place that Catholics called purgatory, right? It's a space between the living and the dead, where you don't have a final destination yet. And so the key part about this, which is always monetary, is that it says this. The practice is thought to have begun to the belief in the purgatory, where it was thought a soul lingered in torment unless elevated by prayer, aid to the church. It always boils down to money. After the Protestant Reformation, souling continued in Britain. Only now the Protestant young and poor offered to pray for the people of the house and their loved ones instead of those in purgatory, while Catholics continued the older tradition. Now, let's talk about one last thing. The last thing we're going to talk about is Mischief Night. There was a time in America during the time of Halloween where they would call it Mischief Night, right? And I wanted to bring up, before I do that, let me jump out of that and let me go to Jack-o'-lantern. That's another one that you see on everyone's house. You see the jack-o'-lantern, everyone's house. Now, where does that come from? Well, let's find out, right? So the jack-o'-lantern, let's go to it. It says this. It says, the jack-o'-lantern is associated with the Irish folktale of Stingy Jack, a clever drunk and con man who fooled the devil into banning him from hell but because of his sinful life could not enter heaven. After his death, he roamed the world carrying a small lantern made of a turnip with a red-hot amber from hell inside to light his way. Scholars believed this legend evolved from sightings of the will-o'-the-wisps, swamp and marsh gases which glowed in the night. On All Hallows Eve, the Irish hollowed out turnips and carved them with faces, placing a candle inside so that they went about souling on the night when the veil between life and death was thinnest. They would be protected from spirits like Stingy Jack. I don't know if, you know, back in the days when I was growing up, kids used to always have the jack-o'-lantern as a means of putting their candy in as they went from door to door. This was actually an Irish folklore where the Irish used to use a turnip and they would carve out the inside and put a candle inside, carve out the face, and they would walk around going souling from door to door, and it would protect them from the spirit of Stingy Jack, right? So now you get an idea of where all this comes from, and there's so much that you can bring up. But now I wanted to pull up Mischief Night. What is Mischief Night? This is the last one right here. Let's see if I can pull it up. If not, we only got about 3 minutes. Let's see if I can get it. But Mischief Night, there was a time in America where, you know, I remember growing up, you know, Halloween night, I mean, that was the night of mischief. I mean, all hell broke loose on Halloween night when I was growing up. You know what I mean? Like, everything went down. I mean, there was so much mischief that night. There was so much reveling. There was so much misbehaving that went on that night. You know what I mean? And that actually comes, that actually, let me read this real quick. All right, so it says this. Let's read this, right? Let me get it. Let's just to get an idea of what this is. Mischief Night. It says this. In the 7th century CE, Guy Fawkes Day added a new component to the development of Halloween. On November 1605, a group of dissident Catholics tried to assassinate the Protestant King James I of Britain in an attempt known as the Gunpowder Plot. The attempt failed, and one of the group, Guy Fawkes, was caught with the explosives beneath the House of Lords. And although he had co-conspirators, his name attached itself famously to the plot. Right? Let's keep reading. Guy Fawkes Day was celebrated by the Protestants of Britain as a triumph over popery, and November 5th became an occasion for anti-Catholic sermons and vandalisms of Catholic homes and businesses, even though officially the government claimed it was a celebration of Providence sparing the king. The next day, bonfires were lit and unpopular figures, often the Pope, were hanged in effigy while people drank, feasted, and lit off fireworks. Children and poor would go to the house, often wearing masks, pushing an effigy of Guy Fawkes in a wheelbarrow and begging for money or treats. Now, this Guy Fawkes Day stemmed, or how can I say this? This Guy Fawkes Day was a prelude to Mischief Night in America. There was a time in America where on Mischief Night, I mean, all kinds of chaos and all kinds of things went down. I mean, the damaging of property and on this night. This was what we did. And even when I was growing up, you know, that's where the whole egging thing came from. We would egg cars and houses and break windows and do all kinds of mischief that night, right? But Let me just pull up what Mischief Night is, a brief history. Mischief Night was basically, the best way to describe it is Mischief Night was basically the devil's night. Right? But let's pull it up real quick. Let me give you a brief overview of Mischief Night. It says Mischief Night is let me pull this up real quick. It says Mischief Night is an informal holiday in which children and teenagers engage in pranks and vandalism. It is known by the variety of names including Devil's Night, Gate Night, Goosey Night, Moving Night, Cabbage Night, and Mat Night. Right? The earliest reference to Mischief Night is from 1790 when a headmaster encouraged a school play which ended in the Ode to Fun, which praises children's tricks on Mischief Nights in most approving terms. In the United Kingdom, these pranks were originally carried out as part of the May Day celebrations, but shifted later in the year, dates varying in different areas, some making it on October 30th, the night before Halloween, others on November 4th, the night before Bonfire Night. According to one historian, May Day and Green May had a little resonance for children in grimy cities. They looked at the opposite end of the year and found the ideal time, the night before the gunpowder plot. However, the shift only happened in late 19th century, described by the Opis as one of the mysteries of the folklore calendar. Right? So this was a night where it says teenagers and children engaged in pranks and vandalism, which is what went on when I was growing up. You destroyed cars, you vandalized cars, and you pranked, and you did all kinds of mischief that night, right? All kinds of things. You were just you did the most horrible things to people's properties that night. This is where this comes from. Well, with that, we're going to class. Salaki, I meant to pull up a few scriptures, but this article is very interesting in tackling a lot of the things, a lot of the pagan customs that we still keep today that we're unaware of and where it comes from. And with that, we're going to class with the Israelite School Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. We've been teaching so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Indians that they're the Lord's chosen people, according to the Bible. We've been teaching this truth since 1969 under Commander General Yohana. Black Watch is coming on in 10 minutes every Monday night. Black Watch with Commander General Yohana from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. You must tune in. The heavy hitters will be in the building. And with that,